Okay, so we're in week 8. Glad to have you all here. We're going to do an overview of tuberculosis today. So tuberculosis has been around with us for a long time. It's been around with us in developed countries for a long time as well. It historically makes an appearance in just about all literature of the 19th century and even going on back. Globally, it's still one of the top 10 causes of death. There's 10 million new cases yearly, 1.6 million deaths back in 2017, and more than 95% of TB deaths occur in low middle income countries, so developing countries, and specifically in poorer areas of urban areas of developing countries, so slums and densely packed areas like that. 60% of deaths occur in 6 countries, including India, Indonesia, China, Nigeria, Pakistan, and South Africa. And that's documented. There's still a lot we don't know about other parts of the world that don't necessarily have as robust health systems as these countries do. 1 million children became ill, 170,000 children died, excluding those with HIV. It's a leading killer of HIV-positive people because HIV is characterized by opportunistic infections due to compromised immune systems. Tuberculosis is actually caused by a species complex. M. tuberculosis causes most TB cases in the US. Mycobacteria that cause TB disease include M. tuberculosis, M. bovis, M. africanum, M. microti, and M. candida. Mycobacteria that do not cause TB include the avium complex. There's a picture of the bacteria there. History of TB. TB, again, has afflicted human beings for millennia. Historically known by a variety of names, including consumption, wasting disease, and the white plague. TB was a death sentence before the appearance of antibiotics, but fortunately now it is a treatable disease. There's problems with the resistance coming up that we're going to talk about later, but in general it's still a treatable disease. Sanatoriums. Before TB antibiotics, people were sent to sanatoriums where they were assigned to bed rest and open air and sunshine. And you see this a lot in European literature of the 19th century, people being sent to sanatoriums and sitting on a beach and sort of resting and not sure, what the success rate of these sanatoriums were, but certainly bringing people out of their otherwise unhealthy environments probably was a good thing. TB patients who could not afford sanatoriums often died at home. Sanatoriums were for the rich, and that's why they sort of appear in 19th century literature as this sort of like kind of somewhat fashionable thing to be sent to the sanatorium and sit on a beach. And it's interesting that TB in itself was somewhat fashionable. There was sort of some people would try to get infected because it made them look thin and pale, and that sort of look was popular at the time in certain areas. It's very strange. Very interesting history. I highly recommend checking it out. And that, look, what happened? So, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so increasing SES and treatment. Developed countries, as their economy expanded, people lived in healthier environments, and the onset of treatments decreased tuberculosis incidence and mortality in developed countries rapidly, as you can see in the plot here. Drugs included streptomycin, isoniazid, and P-aminosalicylate acid, discovered between 1943 and 52. TB deaths have dropped dramatically in the United States. It's very rare to die of TB in the US. But there's been a resurgence, specifically since the 1980s, and contributing factors include inadequate funding for TB control programs. The HIV epidemic has led to an increase in cases in certain populations, increased immigration from countries where TB is common, spread in homeless shelters and correctional facilities, and increased spread of multi-drug resistant TB. So it hasn't gone away. It's decreased, but it's not gone away completely. Incidence rate worldwide, as you can see, this is the same old story that we see over and over again. Primarily afflicts developing countries, not so much in developed countries. Some exceptions to that. Russia is definitely an exception, particularly in prisons. Highly heterogeneous risk. Some countries have it worse than others. You can see here that Pakistan and India have very serious problems with tuberculosis. Some African countries a little bit less. That's no small part to larger population density of India. Rapid urbanization, high density populations, rising incidence of diabetes, unregulated private sector, tobacco, air pollution, indoor cooking fuels, all these things contribute. So that's it for our TB overview. We're going to move on to other aspects of TB. Thank you very much. Okay, hey everyone, back again. We're going to continue our discussion about tuberculosis, talking about risk factors and populations at risk. Risk for what, actually? This can be divided into two categories. There's high risk for infection and there's high risk for developing disease. High risk for becoming infected in the first place includes people that are in proximity and duration of exposure to TB cases, increasing if sputum positive. Developing disease is a bigger issue in the sense that there's more factors involved than simple exposure. Advancing age, immune system dysfunction, HIV co-infection, poor nutritional status, stress, diabetes, access to quality health care, access to medications, for example. High-risk groups in the U.S. include low-income people, homeless folks, people in prisons, people living in crowded institutional situations, malnutrition, and poor access to health care. Special settings include congregate and residential settings, mostly institutional, nursing homes, correctional facilities, healthcare facilities, homeless shelters, drug treatment centers, anywhere where people are contained, large amounts of people are contained within a small space are going to be at risk for TB. Very high risk in correctional facilities. This may be due to inmates who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, come from high-risk backgrounds to begin with, who come in with TB infections, even asymptomatic, and then transmit it on to other people. Increasing number of inmates are infected with HIV. Overcrowded facilities promote the spread of TB. The U.S. is fairly good at screening, other countries not so much. Russia has a very serious problem in their incarcerated populations with TB. IDU interactions, injected drug users are more likely to be exposed to TB, become infected, and develop a disease due to certain risk factors, including being locked into institutional living environments, having poor access to health care, having a higher risk of HIV infection, having a weak immune system due to injecting drugs, and possibly poor nutrition. So I think you can see here that risk for TB and populations at risk are mostly what you think they would be. People who come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds, who are living in sort of risky lifestyles to begin with. Not necessarily a choice. Of course, addiction is a disease, as we know. So anyway, that is TB risks, risk factors, and populations at risk. We're going to move on to the next video about TB. Thank you very much.